guys, thanks for stopping by. Welcome to ASMR. ASMR showcases spine-chilling stories from Reddit. All will be narrated in a soothing ASMR whisper. So let's find a quiet spot, relax, and dive into the world of whispers and chills with these scary stories from Reddit. Back when I was in college, I worked part-time at the university library. Not the main one, with the computers and loud study groups. This was the older archive building, tucked behind the science labs. Most students didn't even know it existed. It housed old newspapers, yearbooks, historical records, stuff most people never touched. My job was simple: keep the lights low, monitor the reading room, and reshelve whatever someone might pull out, which, to be honest, was almost never. For months it was quiet, peaceful even. I'd bring a book, maybe a snack, and just sit behind the desk listening to the hum of the overhead lights, until the night I stayed late. It was exam week. I was covering a shift for a friend who'd come down with the flu. He warned me that something felt off lately. Cold spots in the stacks, footsteps when no one else was in the building. I laughed it off. The place was drafty and old. Of course it had quirks. That night I was alone. It was just after 8 p.m. I was about to close up when I heard something fall in the back room. The deep archive where we kept the town's historical documents. I figured a book had slipped off a shelf. Happens all the time. I went back to check. The air back there felt colder than usual. I had to flick the lights on manually. They're on motion sensors, but they only activate if you're right under them. Nothing looked out of place at first, just rows of shelves and that faint, musty smell of old paper and glue. Then I noticed it. On the floor, between the stacks, an old black binder. It was lying open, but the reel inside was missing. I checked the shelf, no label, no sign it had ever been there. We catalogued everything, and I didn't remember a gap on that row. Then I heard it, shuffling, from the far end of the row. I called out, library's closed, trying to sound casual. No response. I walked slowly towards the noise. The further I went, the colder it got. I reached the end of the row, turned the corner, nothing, just shelves and silence. But when I turned around, the binder was gone. I hadn't heard footsteps, no cars, no doors. It had just vanished. I stood there for a long time, trying to convince myself I'd misremembered where I saw it. Maybe it wasn't the same aisle. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. But then, the overhead lights flickered, just once, like someone had walked under them. Only I hadn't moved. That's when I decided to go back to the desk. Maybe I'd review the camera footage. There was an old system wired up, just in case. I sat down, pulled up the feed, and skipped back to the moment I'd entered the archive. There it was, me walking down the row. But something was wrong. A few frames before I turned the corner, I saw a figure at the far end, barely visible in the grainy black and white footage. They were standing still, facing the shelf. The weirdest part, they didn't leave, even after I turned around and walked back. They just stayed there, unmoving, like a mannequin in the dark. The camera blinked. Next frame, gone. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to call campus security and sound insane, so I told myself it had been a glitch, a shadow, something explainable. I closed the library 10 minutes early and left without looking back. But the next morning, when I came in for my regular shift, the head librarian pulled me aside. She looked pale, said one of the security guards had seen someone in the archive room overnight. But when they checked, the building was empty and locked. And more than that, they found the missing reel. It was sitting on the desk, still warm, like it had just been handled. I didn't say anything. I didn't mention the binder or the figure on the footage. I just nodded, filed the reel back in the system under unclassified, and never worked another night shift again. But sometimes, when I pass the archive building late at night, I swear I see a light on in the back room, and a shadow moving past the stacks. Not searching, just watching. I used to do overnights as a security guard at a corporate office building just outside of Minneapolis. It was one of those sleek, glass-panelled places, 6 stories tall, with motion-sensitive lights and a badge access system that tracked every door swipe. Super modern, super boring. My shift was from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It was just me, a couple dozen security cameras, and a clipboard with hourly patrol logs. Honestly, most nights I'd do a round or 2, then spend the rest of the shift watching movies on my phone in the security room. But last January, something happened during one of my shifts that I still can't explain. I've never told anyone this in detail, just said it was a weird night, but lately I've been thinking about it even more than usual. It started just before midnight. I was doing a routine patrol on the 4th floor, finance and HR. The whole building was locked up, and no one had swiped in or out since 8 p.m. I checked the offices, the break room, even the supply closets. Everything looked fine. Lights dimmed, silence everywhere. Then, just as I was heading back to the elevator, I saw the visitor pass. It was lying on the floor outside conference room 4B. White plastic, with a red stripe across the top that said, guest, in bold. No name on it, no expiration sticker, just the ID chip and a tiny barcode on the back. We issue those passes from the front desk during business hours. I hadn't given one out all night, and the lobby door hadn't opened since the cleaners left at 9:30. I picked it up and turned it over. There was a faint smudge on the back, like a thumbprint in dust. I locked it as found property and kept walking. Around 1:40 a.m, I was back in the security office, scanning through the camera feeds like usual. That's when I noticed something weird. There was movement on the 4th floor. Not dramatic, just the conference room lights flickering on for a few seconds, then back off. I rewound the footage. There was no one in the hallway, but inside the room, the light sensor kicked on, as if someone had stepped inside. Then 30 seconds later, darkness again. I flipped through the hallway cams. Nothing. Every angle showed an empty corridor. I figured maybe the sensor was faulty, or maybe the cleaners had left a car behind that triggered it. But when I checked the logs, the system had registered a door open and close at exactly 1:42 a.m, and it had registered a badge swipe, not an employee badge, the visitor pass, the one I had sitting in my desk drawer. I sat there staring at the log, waiting for it to make sense. It never did. I went up to the 4th floor again. This time I took my flashlight and moved a little slower. The hallway was freezing. I remember that specifically because my breath fogged up and I felt that sick, instinctual chill crawl down my back. The door to 4B was open, not wide, just slightly ajar, like someone had pulled it closed but didn't let it latch. I pushed it open with my foot. The lights didn't come on. I waved my hand to trigger the motion sensor. Nothing. I stepped inside, slowly, and switched on my flashlight. Empty chairs, projector screen, a whiteboard with faded notes from a previous meeting, and, in the centre of the table, a coffee cup. One of those generic office cups with the logo on the side, half full, still steaming. I stood there for a full minute, listening for any sound at all. Nothing. No footsteps. No HVAC on. Not even the casual creaks from the ceiling. I backed out of the room, locked the door, and took the stairs down to the lobby, 2 steps at a time. The visitor pass was still in my drawer, exactly where I left it. The security software confirmed the badge had been used again, twice. Once to access the elevator at 2:07 a.m, and again at 2:09 to open the door to the executive floor on 6, the top level. That floor wasn't even supposed to be accessible after 10 p.m. It required a special override badge that only 3 people in the company had, and none of them were in the building. I stopped checking the cameras after that. I didn't want to see anything else. I just locked the office door, turned off the monitor, and sat in the dark until my shift ended. I didn't even clock out, just left my badge on the desk and drove home in silence. Later that day, I got a call from the building manager. He was calm, polite, but said there'd been an issue with my logs. He asked why I'd signed off on a visitor pass at 11:42 p.m. Said the system showed it being assigned, used, and returned all under my profile. I told him the truth, that I found the pass, that I'd never signed one out. He didn't argue, didn't accuse me of anything, just said, that's not the first time something like this has happened. We're reviewing protocols. Then he hung up. I haven't been back since, but sometimes on nights I stay up too late. I check the live building feed online. There's a public webcam they keep on the lobby for visitors, and once or twice I've seen the elevator doors open when no one's standing there. I used to rent the upstairs unit of a duplex in a quiet neighbourhood just outside of Portland. The landlord lived out of state, and downstairs, Unit B, was supposed to be empty. He told me it had been vacant for over a year, something about foundation repairs that never got finished. Honestly, it was a steal for the price. 2 bedrooms, big windows, and the kind of stillness I'd been craving after years of roommates and thin apartment walls. It was almost too quiet, but I liked that. At first, the weirdness started maybe a week after I moved in. It was small stuff. I'd hear sounds from downstairs, shifting furniture, quiet footsteps, the occasional creak that felt a little too purposeful. I told myself it was the house settling, old pipes, squirrels, anything. But then I started waking up at exactly 2:17 a.m. every single night. No dream, no noise, just this dead quiet stillness that pulled me straight out of sleep, like someone had tapped me on the forehead. The third night it happened, I stayed still, listening, and I swear I heard breathing, not mine, below me. Deep, slow breaths, like someone trying to stay quiet. The floor between units wasn't thick, but it was enough that sounds usually came through muffled. This didn't. It sounded close, like someone was lying directly under my bed. I got up and checked the whole place, bathroom, closets, even the attic access. Nothing. Then I walked outside and looked at the lower unit's windows, all dark, except for the one in the back bedroom. That one was open, just a crack. The curtain was moving. I texted the landlord the next morning, trying to keep it casual. Asked if maybe someone was storing things in Unit B. He replied right away, said no, it was empty. Hadn't been entered in months. He even offered to send someone to recheck the locks. They changed them the following week, but the noises didn't stop. If anything, they got weirder. I'd come home to faint music playing from downstairs, old jazz standards, the kind that sounded like they were coming from a dusty record player. By the time I got to the front door, it would stop. I called the police once, told them I thought maybe someone had broken in. They came, checked the unit, and found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no prints, no one hiding inside. But I know they were down there. One night, I put a glass of water on my nightstand before bed. I woke up at 2:17 again, and the glass was gone. I thought maybe I'd knocked it over in my sleep, but when I checked the living room, it was on the floor, sitting perfectly upright on the rug, still full. Nowhere near the bedroom. That's when I started sleeping with the light on. I tried staying somewhere else a few nights, friends, a motel, but I always ended up back at the duplex. Something about that place had this pull, like I couldn't leave it for long. Then, maybe 2 months in, I met someone who lived nearby for years. Her name was Rebecca. I bumped into her while walking back from the corner store. She looked at me, then looked up at the duplex. "You're in Unit A, right?" she asked. I nodded. Her smile dropped. "You know no one's supposed to be downstairs, right?" I told her I did, that it was under construction or something. She hesitated, then said, She shook her head. He moved out after 4 months, told me he'd caught someone watching him through the vent in the bathroom. I asked her if he'd gone to the cops. He did. They found nothing. Then she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Whatever's down there, it doesn't break in. It's already in." I went back home with this horrible feeling in my stomach. That night, I locked every window, wedged a chair under the doorknob, slept with the light on, and Murphy, my dog, curled tight next to me. At 2:17 a.m, I woke up again, but this time it was different. It was quiet. No breathing, no creaking, no music, just nothing. Until I turned over and saw the light from the bathroom spilling into the hall. I hadn't turned it on. I got out of bed slowly, walked over and peeked in. The mirror was fogged over like someone had just taken a shower, and there was a single wet footprint on the tile. Bare, human, facing the hallway. I backed out, closed the door, and sat on the couch until morning. I moved out 3 days later. Didn't even wait for the lease to run out. Lost my deposit. I didn't care. But here's the thing. Last week, out of curiosity, I checked the rental site where I'd found that duplex. Unit A was listed again, available immediately. But the photos were different this time. In one of them, the shot of the upstairs bedroom, I saw something. Down in the corner of the image, just barely visible through the floor vent, a pair of eyes, looking up. I used to do freelance appraisal work for an estate management company. Basically, when someone died without a will, or left behind a house no one wanted, it was my job to inspect it, take photos, document anything valuable, and determine what the place might sell for. Most of the time, these houses were old, unloved, and falling apart, but one in particular still sticks with me, over 5 years later. It was a small, single-story home on the outskirts of upstate New York, off a winding road called Glass Hill. I remember the name because the drive out there gave me the worst feeling I've ever had on a job, like I was heading somewhere I shouldn't be. The house had belonged to a man named Albert. No spouse, no children. Died at 76 of what the coroner called natural causes. The house had sat empty for over a year, and now the bank wanted to unload it. They'd sent someone out once before, but the person never finished the report. No explanation, just stopped responding, so they called me. I pulled up around noon on a cloudy Thursday. The house was plain from the outside, faded green siding, overgrown yard, a single rusted mailbox with "Read" painted on it, chipped black letters. All the windows were shut tight, curtains drawn. It looked sealed, like it didn't want to be opened. The front door stuck a bit, like it hadn't been used in a while. When I finally got it open, the air that came out was thick and stale, like a place that had been closed up for decades. I stepped inside. It was silent. Not quiet, silent, like the house was holding its breath. The layout was simple. A short hallway, a small kitchen to the right, 2 bedrooms down the back, and a basement door just off the living room. Everything was coated in a thin layer of dust, but there was no sign of mould or decay. In fact, the place was weirdly clean, almost like someone had tidied up and then vanished. The creepiest thing, every room had the curtains drawn and the doors closed, and each door had a lock on the inside. Not the hallway side, the inside of the rooms. That's not something you normally see. Maybe 1 or 2 bedrooms with privacy locks, sure, but the kitchen, the bathroom, even the basement door had 3 sliding bolts, again, all on the inside. I made my notes, took photos. The longer I stayed, the more that the stillness got to me. Not a single creak, no birds outside. Even my phone had 0 reception. I opened up the basement door. The smell hit me instantly, like old wood and something sour underneath it. Not quite raw, but close. The basement was unfinished, with a dirt floor and crumbling stone walls. There were deep scratches on the concrete near the stairs. not animal scratches, wide, like someone had dragged something heavy over and over. I was about to head back up when I saw something near the far wall. A mattress, just lying flat on the dirt. No frame, no sheets, just this stained, sunken mattress surrounded by old food wrappers and empty bottles. And scrawled all over the wall behind it, in black marker, were words, phrases, overlapping each other, over and over. Don't let it in. It knocks twice. Stay awake after dark. It watches through the walls. Dozens of these, some written neatly, some in shaky, frantic handwriting. I snapped a few photos and got out of there. Back in the truck, I looked over my pictures, and something caught my eye. In the photo of the living room mirror, taken when I'd first entered, there was a shape in the reflection. It wasn't me. It was standing in the hallway behind the bedroom doors. But when I'd taken the photo, I was alone, or I thought I was. I didn't go back. I submitted the report and ignored the follow-ups. But about 6 months later, curiosity got the better of me. I searched for the address, found a real estate listing. There was a single comment left under the photos. Who keeps turning all the curtains back? The realtor replied a few days later. We don't know. Every morning we check, they're closed again. That was the last I ever looked it up. But every so often, late at night, I think about that house, and I wonder, what if those locks weren't to keep people out? What if they were to keep something in? I work in restoration, fire, water, mould. We go into damaged houses and get them back to livable condition. Sometimes the jobs are clean, sometimes they're absolutely disgusting. I've crawled under mouldy floorboards, cleared out flood basements full of rats, even found a mummified cat behind a wall once. But I've never had a job stick with me like this one. About 2 years ago, I got a call from a property manager who handled a group of old duplexes outside of Salem. One of the units had been vacant for months, and she said the downstairs tenant had started complaining about a horrible smell, something like dead animals. The crawl space between the floors was sealed off, and she didn't have the key to access it. She offered double our rate if we could get out there within the week. I said sure, easy money. I went out alone with my truck and gear one Wednesday morning. The unit in question was tiny. 1 bedroom, outdated fixtures, no real ventilation. The tenant upstairs wasn't home when I arrived, which honestly made things easier. The smell hit me the second I walked in. It wasn't raw, it wasn't sewage, it was wrong, sharp, sour, like old meat and wet dirt. It clung to the back of your throat. I found the crawl space access behind a small panel in the hallway closet. It had been nailed shut from the outside, which was odd, but not unheard of. Once I pried it open, the smell got 10 times worse. I clicked on my headlamp and dropped down. The crawl space was only about 3 feet tall, just enough to belly crawl. Dirt floor, low beams, spider webs everywhere, standard stuff, except for one thing. About 20 feet in, my light caught something that made me freeze. There was a circle of soot-blackened stones laid out in the dirt. In the centre was a pile of bones, not big ones, small, like birds or maybe squirrels, arranged deliberately. And behind that, there was a shape. At first, I thought it was a bundle of insulation or trash, but when I looked closer, I saw what looked like a figure, small, curled up, facing the wall, its back to me. It wasn't moving. I stared at it for a solid 30 seconds before I found the nerve to speak. Hey, you alright? No response. Sir, madam. I started crawling closer, and that's when I noticed the smell had changed again, stronger, like ammonia and burnt hair. I was maybe 6 feet away when my headlamp flickered, just for a second, but when it came back on, the figure had moved. It hadn't turned around, but its head was now tilted, listening. I froze. Every instinct in my body was screaming to get out, and then it whispered. It was so quiet I didn't understand it at first, just a murmur, like someone speaking through a mouthful of sand. But then it said it again, just loud enough for me to catch it. Not yet. I scrambled backwards so fast, I scraped my knuckles bloody on the beams. My boot got caught in a root or something. I didn't stop to look. When I finally pulled myself up into the hallway, I slammed the access panel shut and nailed it closed again. The property manager asked what I found. I told her there was evidence of someone squatting and left it at that. She said she'd send a pest crew to clear it out. I never told her what I really saw. About a month later, I got a call from a buddy of mine who also worked in restoration. He'd taken a job from the same property company, same duplex, different unit. He asked if I'd had anything weird happen on a site. I said yeah, sometimes. Why? He said, because something down there said my name. I haven't taken a job near Salem since, but sometimes I wonder if I'd gotten closer, if I'd stayed longer, if I'd waited until it turned around, what would I have seen? I used to do early morning shifts at a park maintenance job just outside of town. It was one of those quiet, wooded parks where nothing much happened. Some trails, a couple of picnic tables, a small creek that dried up by late summer. My job started at 5 a.m. I checked trash bins, clean bathrooms, clear branches off the paths, simple stuff. I liked being alone that early, just me, the mist, and the woods, until I started seeing the boy. The first time was in late October. I remember that because it was still dark when I pulled into the lot, and the fog was thick. I parked near the south trail, opened the back of the truck, and grabbed my gear. When I turned around, I saw him, standing just beyond the fence that bordered the woods. He looked about 10 years old, pale skin, dark hoodie, just standing there, motionless. I figured he was with someone, maybe wandered off from a campsite or a morning hike, but when I waved and called out, he didn't move, didn't even blink. I walked a little closer, maybe 10 feet, and then, without turning, he stepped backward into the trees. It was smooth, too smooth, like he glided. I jumped the fence and followed maybe 20 feet in, shining my flashlight between the trees. Nothing, no sound, no kid. I stood there for a while, trying to convince myself it was just a trick of the fog and light. Maybe I saw a tree stump, maybe my eyes were tired, but I couldn't shake how real he looked. The next morning, same time, same place, I saw him again. This time I kept my distance, watched him from behind the truck window. He stood in the exact same spot. No movement, no expression, like he was waiting for something. I didn't get out until it was full daylight. That night, I looked up missing person cases in the area. Nothing matched, no boys, no recent reports, nothing. Still, I convinced myself not to go back the next day. I said I was sick, let someone else take the shift. When I returned the following week, the fog had cleared and the air was colder. Everything felt still. I almost forgot about him until I went to unlock the utility shed near the trail. The padlock was rusted, old, never moved much, but this time there was something wedged underneath it. A small, folded scrap of paper. I thought maybe it was garbage, but when I unfolded it, there were only 4 words written in shaky pencil. Don't let him in. I stood there, staring at it for a long time. The writing looked like a child's. I checked the lock again, still sealed, no signs of break-in. I looked over my shoulder, nothing but quiet trees and damp leaves. That night, I dreamt I was back at the park, same morning fog, same trail, except this time the boy was closer, just on the other side of the fence, and I was holding something, a key. I woke up with my heart pounding and drenched in sweat. I called out the next 2 shifts. stop going near windows after dark. Then one night, I woke up to a sound I couldn't place. It was faint, soft, like someone brushing against the outside of the building. I crept to the window, not wanting to look, but I did, and he was there, standing at the bottom of the fire escape, looking up. His mouth was open, just slightly, like he was trying to say something, but no sound came out. I slammed the blind shut and didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I called someone I knew from the local historical society. She used to help catalogue old park records and weird incidents. I told her just enough to get her curious. When I mentioned the South Trail and the boy, she got quiet. Then she asked me something that gave me the chills. Did he speak to you yet? I said no. She let out a slow breath and said, don't let him, whatever you do. She told me that years ago, decades actually, a boy went missing in those woods, but not in a normal way. There were signs of him after he disappeared. People claimed to see him near the creek, at the fence line, always silent, always watching. But here's the thing, the sightings didn't stop. They kept happening. Once every few years, always in the early morning fog, and always followed by something else. People dreaming about him, seeing him outside their homes, and eventually letting him in. No one knows what happens after that, because those people, they disappeared too. She didn't have answers, just warnings. Told me to avoid the trail, avoid eye contact, never speak back if he talks. I quit the job a week later, moved 3 towns over, and got a job in a warehouse. No more woods, no more fog, and things were quiet for a long time. But sometimes, very early, just before sunrise, I get this feeling, like someone's waiting just beyond the fence, and I swear, I can still hear his footsteps. I don't post much, but this has been sitting with me for a long time, and I guess I just want to know if anyone else has experienced something even remotely similar. I've never really believed in ghosts or spirits. I still don't, honestly. But I also don't have any other explanation for what happened. This happened when I was 24. I just moved into a small duplex in a quiet older neighbourhood outside of Pittsburgh. It was nothing special, just a narrow 2-bedroom place with creaky floors and this weird smell like must and old wood that never quite went away, no matter how many candles I burned. Rent was cheap though, and I was trying to get out of a rough patch, so I didn't complain. The back bedroom was where I set up my office. I worked remote, did freelance editing, so I was home a lot. That room had a single small window that overlooked a stretch of yard and a rotting wooden fence. Beyond the fence was an empty lot, just overgrown grass and a line of pine trees. Never saw anyone back there, ever. The first couple of weeks were fine, uneventful. I was working a lot, trying to settle in. Then I started noticing something. I wouldn't call it activity, it wasn't that obvious. It was more like this low-level unease that built gradually, like I was being watched. It started in the office. Every now and then, I'd get this strong feeling that someone was standing just outside the window. I'd be focused on work, typing, and suddenly I'd just feel this pressure, like someone was staring directly at the back of my head. I'd spin around, nothing, just the yard and the fence. At first, I figured it was nerves, or maybe the isolation. I wasn't seeing friends much, wasn't sleeping great, so I brushed it off. Then, it got worse. I started waking up at the same time every single night. I'd shoot awake like someone had touched me, not dreaming, not groggy, just awake and cold. The worst part, I kept finding the bedroom door rationalise. Maybe I wasn't shutting the door completely. Maybe there was a draft. Then, one night, I heard something. I was lying in bed, house completely silent. I was staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself to go back to sleep, when I heard a sound from the hallway. Not footsteps, not movement. Breathing. Slow, deliberate breathing. It wasn't mine. I was holding mine at that point. It was low and deep, like someone standing just on the other side of the door. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. It went on for maybe a full minute, and then it stopped. Eventually, I got the courage to flip on the bedside lamp. No one there. I barely slept after that. The final thing, the thing that made me leave, happened about a week later. I was working late. I'd moved my setup to the living room by that point, trying to avoid the back office. It had started to feel wrong, like the air was heavier in there. I didn't like turning my back to the window. Anyway, I was sitting on the couch, headphones on, laptop in front of me, lights on, everything normal. Then, out of nowhere, I felt this pressure behind my eyes, like my body suddenly remembered something I was trying to forget. Like that moment, you step into a room and know someone else is there, even if you can't see them. I took off the headphones and looked around, and that's when I saw it. Across the room, in the hallway, leading towards the back bedroom, the light bulb flickered once, and then something moved. I didn't hear it. I just saw it. A shadow. Not shaped like a person exactly. It was wrong. Like someone standing too straight, too still. It didn't move towards me. It didn't vanish. It just stayed there, watching. I stared at it for maybe 15 seconds, frozen, heart going crazy. I bolted, grabbed my laptop, my wallet, my keys, and didn't even shut the door behind me. I slept in my car outside a Walmart that night, called a friend the next morning, and moved in with them for a bit. Never went back alone. A few days later, I had a friend help me grab my stuff in broad daylight. I didn't tell him why. I didn't want to sound crazy. But as we were loading boxes into his truck, he glanced towards the back office window and went completely still. Then he said, "Who's in there?" I said, "No one." He said, "I just saw someone move past the window." That was it for me. I left half my stuff behind and never looked back. I don't know what I experienced. I don't have a satisfying ending. There was no priest, no research into the land, no big reveal. I didn't even report it to the landlord. But I know what I felt. Something in the house was watching me. And the worst part is, it never felt evil. It felt patient, like it was just waiting. That concludes today's Scary Reddit stories. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this creepy journey, don't forget to like and subscribe. Please also leave your own spooky experiences below in the comments. Who knows, I could add it to the next video.